Nicholson and Ramey had faith in the idea because they saw how people in their office fell in love with these little sticky pieces of paper once they started working with them. So Nicholson and Ramey went to Richmond, Virginia, one of the 4 test cities that had failed, and they went up and down the business district, going into offices and giving pads of Post-its to receptionists, secretaries, and anyone else who would listen. Whereas 3M's conventional marketing machinery had failed, giving Post-its to the people who would actually use them did the trick. Once those Richmond office workers started to use Post-its, it didn't seem like a bad idea at all to pay for scratch paper. They got it, and they bought it. The Richmond test turned from failure to success, and soon Post-its were sticking to everything around the world. Here's another simple idea that imagination turned into success. The story began with a man whose problem was just the opposite of spent silvers. This man had something that stuck too well. George de Mestral was a Swiss mountaineer who went hunting one day with his dog. But when they got home, they were both covered with burrs. The burrs were so difficult to remove that de Mestral put them under a magnifying glass to learn why. He saw that they were covered with tiny hooks which attached themselves to fur and fabric. That was when the flash hit. If burrs stuck where you didn't want them, why couldn't you put tiny hooks on things so they would stick where you did want them? Like everyone else mentioned in this book, de Mestral had an imaginative idea, but that was just the beginning. He also had the faith in himself to keep going when people laughed at his idea, which many did, until he eventually found a French textile plant that would help him do what he wanted. However, even when they finally worked out a way to use cotton fabric to make what they called locking tape, they couldn't afford to mass-produce it. And that's when de Mestral accidentally discovered that when you sew nylon under infrared light, it naturally made little hooks. Now they could manufacture it economically. All they needed was a name. One side was fuzzy like velvet, and the other side was crochet, the French word for hook. Take half vel and half crow, combine it with imagination. The result is Velcro, and a Swiss mountaineer becomes a business tycoon. The Sony Corporation once tried to make a very small stereo tape recorder that would work with standard-size cassettes, but they couldn't do it. They could make a small playback machine, but at the time the electronics needed to also make it a recording machine just couldn't be made small enough. They concluded that the design was a failure. Then one day Sony's honorary chairman, Masaru Ibuka, walked into the laboratory and saw that a few of the engineers were using the prototypes of the failed tape recorder to listen to music tapes. They didn't seem to care that it couldn't record. They just liked to be able to walk around listening to their favorite music. Then came the imaginative idea that made all the difference. Ibuka remembered that another division was working on lightweight headphones. That was the flash. Ibuka's imagination made the connection that the rest of the engineers had not. In Ibuka's view, they hadn't made a failed recorder. They had created a successful private stereo listener. They added the headphones, named it the Walkman, and it revolutionized both the music business and the electronics industry. Clarence Saunders was a grocery clerk in a small southern retail store. One day he was standing with a tray in his hands waiting his turn in a cafeteria. He had never earned more than $20 a week before then, and no one had ever noticed anything about him that indicated unusual ability, but something took place in his mind as he stood in the line of waiting people that put his imagination to work. That was when he came up with the idea that this same self-serve concept would also work at the grocery store. Clarence Saunders took the idea to his boss. Naturally, his boss told him he was crazy. So Clarence Saunders quit his job, went out and did what he needed to do to raise the money, and opened the first self-serve grocery store. He called it Piggly Wiggly, and Clarence Saunders, the $20-a-week grocery clerk, rapidly became the multi-million-dollar chain store grocery man of America. Sylvan Goldman was the owner of a number of Piggly Wiggly stores in Oklahoma, and like any good businessman, he spent a lot of time watching his customers go up and down the aisles, putting their choices into their baskets or net shopping bags. One night, while trying to figure out how to get his customers to buy more at one time, he found himself staring at a basket sitting on the seat of a wooden folding chair. Eureka! He called in his mechanic, Fred Young. They put some wheels on the bottom of the legs, added another basket below the seat, and the shopping cart was born. As this edition is being readied for publication, there are about 35 million shopping carts in America, and approximately 1.25 million new carts are sold each year. Thomas Stemberg, whom we also mentioned earlier, was another supermarket executive who watched his customers as they shopped. By this time, shopping carts were well established in supermarkets, and it was because his customers were pushing shopping carts up and down the aisles that he got his flash of inspiration. He was so sure of his idea that he convinced another supermarket executive, Leo Kahn, to join him. Together, they took the supermarket concept and applied it to selling office supplies. And in 1986, they opened their first store in Brighton, Massachusetts. They called it Staples. In 1989, they took the company public, and 10 years later, there were more than 1,000 Staples stores with revenues exceeding $7 billion. We'll end this commentary with another set of connected stories, which make the point that sometimes the most imaginative part of marketing is in the timing. If you were to go shopping in the late 1800s, it usually meant bartering with a merchant who would then have to get the goods from storage shelves kept behind the counter. In the 1870s, fixed pricing was just starting to be used by storekeepers. Merchants were trying the idea by setting out a table of merchandise that was all priced the same, usually 5 cents. Frank Winfield Woolworth was a clerk in a general store, and he convinced the store owner to let him try the 5-cent table idea. Although it worked, the owner wasn't impressed. So Woolworth borrowed $350 from his boss, and in 1879 opened his first 5-cent store in Utica, New York. It was an entire store full of goods where everything cost a nickel. A year later, he had 4 stores, and the fourth one, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was the first that he named F.W. Woolworth's 5 and 10 cent store. 20 years later, he had 238 stores. By the time of his death in 1919, there were over 1,000 F.W. Woolworth locations. He had established the first nationwide chain of general merchandise stores, and he had built the tallest building in New York City as his headquarters. The Woolworth Company stayed true to the original idea and didn't carry any merchandise that cost more than a dime until 1932, when the top price was raised to 20 cents. But as times changed, the fixed price was dropped, the merchandise became more varied, and the company kept growing until it had over 8,000 stores worldwide, selling everything from notions to appliances and furniture. Then in the 1960s and 1970s, something started to happen. The mood of America was changing, but the Woolworth stores weren't. And that was when Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas, in 1962. Walton got into the retail business after the Second World War, when his father-in-law loaned him the money to buy a franchise Butler Brothers store in Bentonville, Arkansas. By 1962, Sam and his brother Bud owned 16 variety stores in Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. It was in these stores that Sam Walton first started adding the magic ingredient of imagination. In addition to his flair for promotion, Sam tried new approaches to the way household goods and general merchandise could be sold at retail. He insisted on clean, well-lighted interiors, and he introduced the concept of self-service, with aisles wide enough for shopping carts and checkout counters at the front of the store. He also started buying direct from manufacturers, and he created profit-sharing plans that kept his family of employees loyal, hard-working, and neighborly. In 1962, he incorporated those and other imaginative ideas when he opened his first store that he called Walmart. The basic magic was that he sold brand-name merchandise at discount prices. But there was also magic in the way he kept a friendly hometown feel to his store, even though it was what is now called a big box store. Sam Walton's Walmart store was a success, so he just kept building and opening more of them, first in small towns and rural areas, then in larger towns, then big cities, and it wasn't long before he had a national chain. By 1992, when Sam Walton died, there were more than 1,700 Walmart stores. It was the biggest retailer in the country. It employed more than 600,000 people, and Sam Walton was the richest man in America. In 2003, the stores numbered more than 3,200 in the U.S. and more than 1,100 in foreign countries. The company employed more than 1,300,000 people worldwide and served more than 1 million customers a week. Along the way, Woolworths and other older retailers such as Kresge's tried to get on the bandwagon with their Woolco and Kmart stores, but they couldn't seem to get it right. They had given up their old five-and-dime identity to become higher-priced general retailers, and when Walmart came along and redefined that part of the market, the others seemed to have run out of the kind of imagination they'd had in the beginning. Now, here's the twist to the story. David Gold was running a liquor store that he had inherited from his father. He noticed that whenever he put out a display of goods priced at 98 cents or $1, the goods would sell okay, but if his sign said 99 cents, the goods sold out in no time. He decided that he would open a store called the 99-cent only store, where everything would be priced at 99 cents. Sound familiar? Frank Woolworth's imaginative idea from 1879, which had been dropped at his namesake chain by the 1940s and 1950s, had just gotten a fresh shot of imagination from David Gold in 1982. As usual, friends and family told him he was crazy, but David Gold went out to find suppliers who would sell him discontinued merchandise or overproduced products at a price low enough that he could offer them to the public at 99 cents. He found them. And they even had brand-name products of everything from hardware to pantyhose, cleaning products, motor oil, kitchenware, cosmetics, electronics, toys, canned goods, frozen foods, cookies, fresh fruit, even gourmet foods. More than 5,000 items that he could sell for 99 cents and still make a profit. David Gold opened his first well-lighted, brightly colored green and fuchsia wide-aisle store in Inglewood, California in 1982. By 2003, he had 142 stores in California, Nevada, and Arizona, and he was listed on the Forbes 400 as having earned a personal fortune estimated at more than $650 million. As Napoleon Hill wrote elsewhere about the creation of Piggly Wiggly, where in this story do you see the slightest indication of something that you could not duplicate? The plan, which made millions of dollars for its originator, was a very simple idea that anyone could have adopted, yet considerable imagination was required to put the idea to work in a practical sort of way. The more simple and easily adapted an idea is, the greater is its value, as no one is looking for ideas that are involved with great detail or are in any way complicated. This is the end of the editor's comments. There is no standard price on ideas. The creator of ideas sets his or her own price, and if they are smart, they get it. The story of practically every great fortune starts with a day when a creator of ideas and a seller of ideas got together and worked in harmony. Carnegie surrounded himself with men who could do what he could not do, men who created ideas and men who put ideas into operation, and that was what made him and the others fabulously rich. Millions of people go through life hoping for favorable breaks. Perhaps a favorable break can get you an opportunity, but the safest plan is not to depend upon luck. It was a favorable break that gave me the biggest opportunity of my life, but more than 20 years of determined effort had to be devoted to that opportunity before it became an asset. The break consisted of my good fortune in meeting and gaining the cooperation of Andrew Carnegie. On that occasion, Carnegie planted in my mind the idea of organizing the principles of achievement into a philosophy of success. Millions of people have profited by the discoveries made in the years of research, and fortunes have been accumulated through the application of the philosophy. The beginning was simple. It was an idea that anyone might have developed. The favorable break came through Carnegie. But what about the determination, definiteness of purpose, and the desire to attain the goal, and the persistent effort of all those years of research? It was no ordinary desire that survived disappointment, discouragement, temporary defeat, criticism, and the constant reminding that I was wasting my time. It was a burning desire, an obsession.